Okay, hi, this is Dr. Joy again. I tried to adjust so I'm a little less backlit. I'm still somewhat side lit. And here we are out in our melting snowstorm. This next short video is about rehearsal basics. So bear with me again as I'm out in the elements. There may be some background noise like that, and my dog might make an appearance. Go get it. Okay, so rehearsal basics. Most important thing, you need to plan ahead in order to be able to be in the moment. Directing is a lot of pressure, and you get nervous just like the actors do. A way to help calm your nerves is to know that you are well prepared, just like in sports, just like in dance. If you know that you have prepared in advance, then you can go in more confidently, and then that frees you up to be more in the moment with your actors. Always be warm, polite, appreciative, and authentic. You'll find your own style as you're becoming a director, but it's important to never be condescending or domineering, especially at the beginning when you might be a little nervous and looking for ways to sort of get confident. There is never enough time. There's never enough time. There's never an ideal scenario in which you have tons and tons of time. People just don't have time, and time costs money on set. So it's really imperative that you manage the time well and that you be aware of how time is passing in your rehearsals. A watch is good. It's really important to avoid looking at your phone if at all possible and to try to turn off notifications so that your phone isn't making a lot of noise. The less you talk, the better. I know that's sort of counterintuitive. You would think that the director's in charge, they're trying to get their vision to everyone, they should be talking, but they should not. It is not about them, and time is ticking. It's really important that you figure out how to be concise in everything that you're trying to get across, and that you give very precise instructions and adjustments to your actors and the rest of your crew. To talk a little bit about the order of things. First thing that happens at any rehearsal is introductions. Make sure that people in the room know each other's name. That's just like a basic human reality. It's good to know who you're working with. The next thing is a table read. We'll get into the details of that. There may or may not be a table, but it is just a read through of the scene, or in your case, the short play, the totality of what is going to be shot. Then you get into blocking. We'll talk more about that, the staging of the actors. Then you do a run through. I like that the French call all of rehearsal a répétition, because so much of rehearsal is just doing it a couple of times. Then you give adjustments, which are essentially notes, and then you shoot. Sometimes the shoot is the same day as the rehearsal. In a good process, you get a rehearsal separate from the film shoot itself. Okay, now on to some important terminology. This first term, blocking. Blocking just means the choreography of an actor's movement. The term blocking has been used for where we have the actors go at what period in time in a show ever since the Victorian era, where Gilbert and Sullivan sort of started doing these big, predecessors of the American musical with a lot of characters, needed to figure out where they all went, and they use these tiny little blocks to represent the different characters moving around different places. So that's where we get the term blocking. People still do this to this day. It's said that the blocking for the film Rope by Alfred Hitchcock was done using chess pieces on a little dollhouse model to try to figure out where they would go and how to get the best angle. So that's where the term blocking comes from. It's also sometimes just referred to as staging, but blocking is a technical term for theater and film. In terms of directing, it's important to give only the big picture movements that affect the camera, or in theater affect where the actors are in terms of the lights. You don't need to tell the actors, for example, when to adjust their glasses, when to put their hair behind their ear, when to adjust their clothing. These things may come up naturally, and if you do like them, you can tell them to keep them, or if you need them to change the kind of micro blocking, you can do it as an adjustment. When you're giving them their movements in the very beginning of a rehearsal, you don't need to give anything small. It really is useful to help them, to let them find their own things and not try to micromanage. Business is actually what we refer to as staging, that gestures that have to do with objects, props, or costume pieces. The business with her glasses, the business with the coffee cup at that moment. Let the actors find their own business. It's actually part of a character how they sort of manage the physical objects of their own life. And you can certainly give like yay or nay notes, but never tell them exactly what to do with their objects or props or costume pieces. Adjustments are basically the notes that you give between runs or between takes. We sometimes use this term adjustments because of notes because we're trying to focus on how it's a kind of small thing that you're shifting. This isn't a big significant note, just a little adjustment on your business with the glasses, just a little adjustment on your blocking during the cross to stage left or the cross to camera left. All right. Also about adjustments, it's important to give only one or two at a time just because it's hard to sort of process a lot of new information in between takes. Okay, now on to sort of breaking down these different sections of rehearsal. In the introductions, you want to be warm and grateful, as I said before, be authentic, make sure we know the names of everyone in the room. And then you move on to the table read. A table read may or may not have a table, but it has some specific steps. An important thing is to give big cuts first. Anything that you want to get out of the current script that the actor has in front of them, tell them before they start reading. Be specific and precise about this. In the monologue at the bottom of the page, let's take out that second sentence and also the word very in the last sentence. Be very specific and precise about how you give cuts. In a table read, the director or someone else will read the stage directions or the action lines. You can give permission to your actors to be light with the acting or to think of it as a little bit of a dry read. Their goal is not to impress anyone with their sort of acting chops, but instead to understand the text and to connect with their fellow actors. Have a very brief conversation after the first table read. It's good to start with something like, "Good job, everybody. Any questions? Any moments that don't make sense?" These are good sort of big picture questions to ask after a table read. In general, theater rehearsal takes much more time at the so-called table. Film does not. The table read is very quick and you move on to the next step pretty expressly. For our rehearsal process, it will be useful that to after you have done the table read to go ahead and break it down into the beats for the actor and to share with the actors which director is doing which beat. So we're considering the first beat from line 1 on page 1 to the middle of page 2 where she says XYZ. The second beat goes from this line to this line. Just break it down so that they know and understand that there's different directors for different beats. And for our rehearsal process, it's important that all directors should participate equally in the table read. No one or another director is directing the table read. You're all working together on that. This is a picture that I like of Alfred Hitchcock directing the table read of Rope. You will notice indeed that there is no table. That they are sitting on these kind of classic film chairs, the folding chairs that, you know, get out of the way quickly. They're in a half circle facing him, which kind of makes sense because the film itself is also staged sort of in a kind of flat way with the camera usually on kind of one side. They all have their scripts in hand and are thinking. This is what we do in a table read. We think about things. You'll notice he's really the only one focusing on the table read. It's happening on a sort of side of the set when the rest of the crew is working on construction and other kind of logistical matters. Hopefully they're being quiet enough that the actors can hear each other in the table read. Once you've done the table read, you go into blocking. Sometimes we'll say, let's get up on our feet. It's important in the blocking rehearsal that there's enough space, that there's as much space as there will be for the shoot itself. Sometimes you get shunted off into a side corner, but you do want to be replicating the actual amount of space you'll be taking up in the shoot so that the actors can get used to that in their body. You can go ahead and block beat by beat. So you give them the staging and have them work through it once for the first beat. Then for our purposes, shift over to the second beat and the second director, and then the third, etc., etc. It's useful to share them some information about what the location is going to look like since our first rehearsal is not on location. Show them pictures of the space or describe the place that you're going to be, and give them a little bit of information about where the camera is going to be and the kind of shots that you're thinking of at the time. This can happen after or as you're giving the blocking. So then you walk a little bit forward. As you do that, the camera will be pushing in towards you, so we'll be getting a little bit more of a close-up. When you turn to talk to him, the camera is going to shift so that it's on his face. You don't need to be super detailed about it, but for our purposes, in terms of these long one-shots, it's useful to give them an idea of what's coming. Again, explain the big picture blocking simply. The only things that you need to tell them in advance what to do is what affects the camera angle and the shots themselves. Where they are before the action starts is called their ones. We say, everyone go to your ones. And then when they say action, they can start the sort of motions that begin the blocking of the full scene. In naturalistic acting, which is what we're working on in this project, all blocking should be motivated, meaning that there is a reason that they are going there. People move because they need or want things. We don't move just for kicks. This isn't a choreographed musical theater bit. This is sort of naturalism. If an actor is smoking a cigarette and they need to ash, but they don't want to ash over here, they'll sort of go over here to ash the cigarette. I'm thinking of Winter Games, that one particular short play that we're working on. You can make up reasons for them to go places if you want to get more movement happening. It doesn't have to just be in the script. You can sort of create in your mind authentic and natural reasons why they would need to move around or do things, but always think about the justification and why they're doing it. Actors should never look like they're going someplace because someone told them to, even though they will. They're usually very responsive. It should be motivated from the character. Just because it is motivated from a character's need, it can also still be poetic. You'll notice in Rope, they're often very close to each other, perhaps slightly more close to each other than people would be at a normal dinner party. This is because of that sort of claustrophobia that Hitchcock is playing with. Everything's a little too close, a little too tight. You can be poetic in your staging, but it needs to sort of fly under the radar of also being a kind of naturalistic motivated rationale. Once you have the blocking of a beat, have them run the full beat with no interruptions. And just a reminder that each director is determining blocking for their own beat. You're the sort of master of your ship. You're the sort of ship captain for your beat. All right, once you have got it blocked, the next step is repetition. Again, the French word for rehearsal itself is répétition. So in English, we say it's a rehearing, a rehearsal. In French, it's a sort of redoing, a repeating. And again, getting the blocking in your body before the pressure of camera is a really important part for actors. Once each beat has been blocked, try to do the entire thing all through once. They might not know their lines fully, and it can be useful to have one of the directors be on book, meaning that they're looking at their lines and the actor can say line, just like in a play, and the director can look down and give them the line that they need to say. But getting the flow, beginning, middle to end, and trying to get the full energy of the dramatic arc is a really useful rehearsal technique. Once you've done a kind of full repetition, you can start with these same big picture questions. How did that feel? Any questions? Let the actor talk first before you jump in and start giving adjustments. Once you've heard what they have to say or given a couple adjustments, you can do great. Let's do it again. We try to not say let's do it one more time, just in case we end up doing it 3 more times. We don't want to be a liar. And just a reminder that you only want to give 1 or 2 notes before the next repetition. It's really hard to hold too many things in your head. If it's a repetition of the full piece, maybe each director gets one sort of big note for their section. You can clarify something about the blocking, and then we can get into the Weston book and think about imagery, verbs, facts, as if, metaphor, and again, questions. Overall, in theater, we rehearse a lot. In film, we sometimes rehearse very, very little. It's not uncommon to have the rehearsal happen just moments before the shoot when the actor's already in costume and makeup. Sometimes you'll send the film crew away so that they can take a breather before they come back in and do the start to actually shoot. And it's very, very common that the first couple takes are actually a kind of rehearsal as well. A few more small things about differences between film rehearsal and theater rehearsal, because I know some people in this class are coming in having been in plays before. Some big differences. The amount of time. In theater, you get a lot of rehearsal, and in film, you really, really don't. You just have to embrace this as you're moving into directing film. It's also, you don't always shoot a film chronologically, so there's something tricky sometimes about having to rehearse a scene in the climax or third act of a film before you've even shot or rehearsed the first act. Sometimes more of the rehearsal is about the logistics of where the character is on their emotional journey than in theater, where you do get to sort of do it all in one order. In film, we don't have a proscenium. Generally, you don't have to cheat out as much. There might be some exceptions for this in terms of one takes like we're doing for our first exercise. But people in film can actually look directly at each other and talk rather than having to cheat out for the audience that's looking at them from a proscenium angle. There's not a stage manager writing down the blocking in film the way that there is in theater. Sometimes you'll have someone on continuity taking some notes, but often it's really up to the actors, the director, to some degree, in a big shoot, the first AD who does a lot of work with actors to keep track of the blocking. You don't have a sort of Bible in which all of the blocking for the film is consistently recorded. Something we have to think about more in film is actor height differences. This is not such a big deal on the stage because the audience is looking from one angle at usually the front of your body. But when you're doing over the shoulder shots, when actors are touching or in close contact with each other, sometimes those height differences can be a big deal. There's a lot of film jokes about Tom Cruise having to stand on an apple box, which is just a sort of uh, a weight bearing crate that you can use on a film set in order to be an acceptable looking height with his leading lady. He's, notoriously not a very tall man. So be aware of how height differences are functioning and think about how that may affect your shoot. Also, when we're talking about film, it's very common for actors, especially people who've done only film acting and not theater acting, to not sort of do it fully until the camera is running. So, this is one reason to avoid giving too many detailed emotional notes while you're doing a rehearsal, because it might be that the actor will sort of turn on their emotional engine a little bit better once the camera is actually going. Save those sort of adjustments about emotional depth for once you've actually seen how they're going to be in front of the camera. Many actors are wary of over rehearsing. So if you're coming in from theater and you're used to doing a lot of rehearsal, you might want to be careful of not pushing for too many rehearsals, not too many repetitions before you actually get things going, especially if you're tight on time. Film actors can get a little anxious about that, and sometimes it can make their performances worse. Yeah, and as I said before, first takes become a kind of rehearsal, and that's fine because then you can also see how what they're doing is reflected on the screen. The big similarities are that actors always must prepare before rehearsals, whether it's theater or film. They got to get ready, they got to learn their lines, they got to try to understand what they're doing and come to set prepared. And also in both practices, very important for actors to hit their marks. In both theater and film, we use spikes. There'll be spike tape on the floor or just slightly out of the camera's view, indicating where they need to get to in order to be in the right place for either the lights or the camera. So we really appreciate an actor who knows how to hit their marks, especially because they're going to have to do it over and over again and again. Time is ticking and camera is running. I think this is the end of this video, so thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in class soon.